Fear not. So, yes, that was Pastor's sermon theme for today. And so when I received the phone call from him at 7 o'clock this morning, asking if I would fill in for him today, there was anything but not fearing. But God is with us and he's good. Is he not? Amen. So this morning, as I don't have anything elaborate prepared, we're going to, what I'll refer to is have a stone soup sermon. For those of you that are familiar with the book or the story of Stone Soup, it's about soldiers who came to town. They had nothing to eat. So one of them took a stone, put it into a pot, and filled it with water. And slowly over time, they convinced all the rest of the inhabitants of the village to bring something to add to this wonderful soup that will come from the stone. And they brought vegetables and carrots and potatoes. And before you know it, it was a delicious soup for them all to have. And so that's the kind of sermon we're going to have today. You and I are going to have a brief discussion about fear and fearing not. So in the first reading from today, I'll start us off. We heard about Ahaz, who was facing adversaries coming upon him, and he elected to try to deal with it on his own. He was afraid of what was going to come, and he didn't want to ask God's help to deal with it. And Isaiah the prophet convinces him to think differently, that he should rely on God in those times that are difficult. And so think about that. Hold that in your mind, what kind of response that is, how often and how easy it is to leave God out of our fears. And then in the gospel reading, we hear about Joseph, and he's prepared to dismiss Mary quietly. But God sends an angel to him and tells him, don't be afraid. God's constantly, from the beginning of time, coming to us to provide hope in times of fear, to give us peace that Jesus grants us, that peace or that shalom that Pastor is so often talking to us about. And challenging us to really see and to grasp and to come to deeply understand. And how important that peace is to us, especially at times when we may fear. So what do you think about the gospel of story that we hear today and of Joseph? And what do you suppose we have in terms of fear? What did Joseph have to fear, do you suppose? I mean, here he was, an upright. We hear in the reading that he's a righteous man. I'm sorry, what was that?
Public ridicule.
Public ridicule, for sure. Especially being a righteous man. If he was upright and a member of his community in good standing, people looked to him. And taking a wife who already had a child, there would definitely be some ridicule. Anything else? What else do you think that Joseph may have had to fear? Mary's unfaithfulness. They're for sure. I mean, doubt that could creep in. Very difficult. A hard story. This woman you're about to take to be your wife, and she's pregnant. There's fear about that. There could be serious doubt about who he was about to take as his wife. Yes? Raising a child. Not an easy thing. And certainly for Joseph, right? It would have been much sooner than he was prepared for. Who knows what kind of plans he may have had for his life. and what kind of plan he may have had for when it would be time to have a family and begin a family. Certainly a fear. Any other thoughts or? Exactly. Even after hearing the angel come and tell him not to fear, you know, he's going to be raising the Messiah. I mean, this is the Messiah he would have learned about in temple and was aware of. And now it's going to happen. And now he's going to have a part of it. That certainly would raise some concerns for me. I don't know about you, but that's definitely a big one. Any other thoughts? Shame.
Because he has to explain it to the rest of the village.
That's right.
What about going to Bethlehem, not having a place to live, not having any income? That would be frightening.
One more time, Andy.
Going to Bethlehem without a home. It's all strange to you, no job, no money. How are you going to live? Especially raising a family.
Definitely.
Does anybody know what kind of job he did end up with?
Or did Joseph, or did he take the gifts he got from the wise men and lived on that?
And not that I'm aware of. I'm not aware that he was able to manage his life on the gifts of the wise men. But so you deep Bible scholars out there, do you know for sure, does the Bible tell us, or do we assume because we know Jesus had carpenter skills that he would have learned that from Joseph? Is anyone aware of a Bible passage where we know for sure that Joseph was a carpenter? I think we're assumed because we knew that Jesus came from a background of carpentry. So the assumption would be that his father was a carpenter.
He built the crosses for the Romans. That was one of his jobs. And that came up in one of the lessons.
So there we go. Then he must have been a carpenter of some form. All right. Great. So for us, what do we have to fear? A lot of those common things. I mean, it was clear that Joseph, in his time, had a lot of fears that may be held in common with us in the current day. We'll just put this here. We can reflect on those things and try to apply them to ourselves. Clearly in this story, the angel of the Lord was speaking to Mary and also to Joseph, and we hear from their son, as Jesus instructs us throughout times, constantly not to be afraid. How does God make a difference in our fears or our hesitation? I guess that's a question for us to wrestle with in the here and now. Are we more Ahaz-like and like to deal with these things on our own, feel that we are alone in dealing with those things, or do we accept the invitation of Jesus not to fear because we can cling to him and the faithful promises that he makes? So God is always coming to us and saying, fear not. So what don't we have to be afraid of? And these are thoughts that I actually saw that Pastor was jotting down. So I'm stealing a little bit of what he had available to think. And he had these questions for us to wrestle with and maybe to think about as we come into this season of peace. We hear, don't be afraid. So for us, don't be afraid to recognize our own needs, to receive and give love. Don't be afraid to seek and find pain and suffering in the world, whether it's our own, or to seek and find the pain and suffering of those people around us who may be in need of knowing the peace that surpasses all understanding that we get from following Jesus. Don't be afraid to ask yourself the question, how do my words and my actions affect others? Don't be afraid to live simply so that others might simply live. Don't be afraid to ask the question, do I need something or do I want it? And don't be afraid to open the gift of Jesus Christ, to follow him and to give birth to the world through your own lives for those around you. Amen.